We're going to do a half-hour presentation on crisis communication. This is the Impact Group Digital Leadership Academy. So happy you're here. Maybe introduce some of those that'll be presenting today. Phil, would you like to say a quick word of introduction?
Sure. My name's Phil Herman. I'm one of the partners at the Impact Group. Joined the Impact Group a little over a year and a half ago. My entire career up until that point was 26 years in public education as a teacher, principal, director of human resources, assistant superintendent, and for 11 years as a superintendent. So it's wonderful to be here with all of you this morning.
Thanks, Phil. Lauren, would you like to say a quick introduction?
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren Shear. I have been with the Impact Group for 2 years. I am the manager of new business development, and I am also a proud parent of Revere Local Schools. I have 2 boys, 8th grade and 5th grade, and very happy to be here on the webinar this morning.
Thank you. And also we're very fortunate this morning to have Dr. Tefts with us, superintendent of Revere. Gosh, we've worked with Dr. Tefts for many years, Revere as well as at Worcester. And Dr. Tefts, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for that. But my official title is I am president of the Phil Herman Fan Club. I want for all of those of you that are on today, dues are due at the first of each month. I actually am a big fan of Phil's and following Phil's leadership. I'm glad that he has brought his intellectual capital to the Impact Group, because that's quite an asset. And for Lauren, as a parent, we'll talk about a little bit some of our experiences around a particular difficult event. And it's great to have her expertise from the Impact Group, but also as a parent within the system.
Thanks, Michael. So appreciate it. We're also big fans of the Phil Herman Fan Club, as well as the Michael Tefts Fan Club. So it's all right. So Mutual Admiration Society. Awesome. Let's get cooking here. What is a crisis? At the center of communication is trust. If you think about it, we're a communications firm, right? People will come to us all the time saying, how do we communicate? And people, they want to do websites and email blasts. All that stuff is good. But the first question we always ask is, does your community trust you? I want you to think about who's the most, don't say it out loud, but who's the most dishonest person you can imagine? The most dishonest person. Picture that person in your mind, and that person gives you a really nice looking financial prospectus. It's really beautiful. It looks nice, and there's websites that it links to. It really is sharp. Would you invest in that? No way. I don't care what your communication is like if the foundation of trust is lacking. Crisis communications is about maintaining trust. Think about all the work you do in your district or on your board of DD or whoever is joining us today to make sure that that link of trust is kept. Understand that when a crisis event occurs, it is a breach of trust. Something has happened. An employee has made a bad decision. A child has been hurt. Something has happened. That trust is potentially breached. What do we do to make sure that we're going in the right direction? We need to prepare for that. You don't prepare for battle as it's happening. You have your game plan ahead of time. There's the pre, there's the event itself, and then there's the post. There's a healing process. And this whole thing would take 3 hours, and we have another 27 minutes. So what I want to do is just kind of do some of the high level pieces. But I guess I wanted to ask just some of the fundamental aspects of the being prepared. One of them is having a spokesperson in your district. I don't know, Phil, if you would like to just address this really quick about the importance of having someone in your district that has the training and the chops to handle some of these difficult questions.
Sure, Tom. And actually, I mean, it's not having a person, but having multiple people in your district that have the training and the chops. And so, and being clear about who is the spokesperson. Tom, you and I have talked about this before. Sometimes we're giving presentations in Columbus, and we look around the room, and the superintendent is there, and the treasurer is there, and the assistant superintendent is there, and the director of human resources is there, and their communications manager is there, and we're wondering, who would speak back at the district if there is an issue, and have they had basics of training about how to speak with the media? So it's essential to identify who is that spokesperson, And then where's your bench depth? Who are the individuals when that person is not available? And is the entire administrative team and Board of Education clear on who those spokespeople are? Then how do we prepare and how do we practice with them, which is another key role. If we think that you can step into the ring and start boxing right away without doing any training in boxing, you're going to get crushed. And so it's the same thing with talking to a reporter or responding in the event of a crisis. It's really, really important to understand what are those primary components of communicating, and are we preparing our team members to be able to do that?
So who are your spokespeople? Again, so your superintendent is on vacation, your assistant superintendent has the flu, and your director of communication is gosh knows where. What is your redundancy to make sure that you have people that are trained to do this? They have to be trained. This is not an on the job. You got to train the folks. And then Phil had a great point earlier about having clearly delegated who speaks to the press. We had a situation years ago where we had, I think a bus garage got knocked over. But anyway, so the press shows up, and there wasn't clear direction as to who speaks to the press, and the press talked to that maintenance guy. And that maintenance guy said, I've been telling them about that beam for 30 years. And they, what you need to have is the press guy the maintenance guy says, I appreciate you coming. Could I get you a bottle of water? I'm going to direct you to our spokesperson. But that has to be clearly understood. The next piece you have to understand is how to develop a message. And I'm going to bring in Dr. Tefts and Lauren here in a moment. What is your message? When a crisis occurs, we have to have a very clear idea of what our message is. And again, this is a 3-hour presentation. I'm trying to give you guys a snippet. Your message has a couple points. You always begin and end with something we call the safety sandwich. The health and safety of those we support or serve is our primary mission. We want to make sure that we're highlighting the fact that the health and safety, that's what it's all about. That's what when a negative situation happens, a lot of times reporters and such will want to zero in on the negative. We want to pull them back and remind them the health and safety. So the health and safety, next component of a message is what happened? Next component, what are we doing about it? Last component, when is your next update to be expected? And then you end with the health and safety of our children as our primary. You have to have a message. And the key here is when a situation occurs to continue to go back to that message again and again. Your trained people and anyone else who's going to speak to the press. And Michael, I'm so excited you're with us, as well as Lauren. Anything you want to share as far as a situation that you've had and how to properly package a message to make sure that your residents know what's going on?
Yeah, and Tom, I think you started with the right question, is what is a crisis? Because I think you need to define a crisis today a little differently than we have in the past. And your traditional crisis is that once in a career event. If you have good systems and protocols in place, what you have referenced with the safety sandwich, you'll really redefine what a crisis is. And I think you'll utilize those systems more often than the once in a career event, because as you and I've talked about, you actually can grow capital in a crisis situation if you handle it really, really well. And we happen to have, I think what led to my invitation here is we had a difficult event in Revere where we had to literally move students out of a building, move them to another building due to the typical event that we've all had in public education, where somebody phones in a response, and you have to take all of those seriously. And we did, and evaluated that with our safety forces. And as we're doing that, we're communicating with our families. So part of the safety sandwich is we have an expectation that we will communicate with our families every 10 minutes. Even if in 10 minutes we have no response because we don't have an update that fast, then we say that. And I think we lead with honesty. And sometimes I think we can over-process the training. Karen Arbogast is our communications coordinator. She's on the Zoom here today. You know, what makes her amazing is she's a mom. And she was a mom with great training. She's incredibly calm. She's incredibly articulate, but she delivered information to our families as a mom, and she did it every 10 minutes. And our system is, as superintendent, I lead with that. So I will come out, the very first message our families will hear will be from me, which is not always easy to do in the middle of chaos, but she does a really good job of pulling me away. We create that message. The message is intentional. It's clear. It's concise. We want our families to know everything we know. And then I let our families know from this point forward, you'll be hearing from our communications coordinator. It's the communications coordinator every 10 minutes, if that lasts for 40 minutes or 4 hours. And then the last message is again from the superintendent, where I say, it's over, we're done, thank you. And then we debrief that with a tabletop exercise within the organization of what did we learn, what went well. Now, during those 10-minute processes, we are monitoring Facebook. So when Phil talks about bench depth, part of that is you've got to have somebody monitoring social media. So another person who is on with us is one of our administrative assistants, the most amazing administrative assistant I've ever met, and Brenda Mall. Brenda plays a role where she was literally monitoring social media, feeding information to our communications coordinator. The communication coordinator literally hangs up from delivering a message to roughly 7,000 people in a matter of 30 seconds. And she's back to customizing the next message. And at times, this is where you've got to have the training, because she has to have the chops that you've used to say to the chief of police, I need a message. I need answers to this right now. She needs to say to the superintendent, Michael, I know you're busy. I need answers to this right now. And we get that information to her. Usually the first 2 messages that come out are coming from what we know internally. Every message after that, we are really answering the FAQs that we're developing on social media. So when the message goes out, parents are saying, well, what about? And she's giving answers to those questions when she'll say, we are reading these questions on social media, keep them coming. I will answer that for you. I'll answer this one for you. That's all I have right now. I'll be back in 10 minutes. And another thing that's fascinating about this process, because of social media, who else is involved? The media. The media is not calling you, and you're not trying to pivot and find time for them, because they're now watching on social media and they'll be repeating. The school district just gave a message out. Here's what they said. So our families are hearing it. The media is hearing it. And, we're trying to develop relationships. We're trying to be honest. We're trying to be transparent, and we're just trying to be consistent. And Lauren, one of your terrific impact group partners, she was a parent in this process, and a little difficult for Revere when we have an expert on the other line, but we were trying to represent ourselves well, and we love the grace that Lauren gave us at the end of that.
Lauren, I was going to ask, as you are a communications professional, but you're also a mom. You're a mom in that district with kids there. How important was it to you that you were receiving information every 10 minutes, or just that the kids are safe and things are moving, and what was happening?
Oh, it was an incredibly important piece to stay calm as a parent. What I think the district did so well was they did what they said they were going to do. So every 10 minutes, I knew that I was going to get a call. And as Dr. Teff said, even if that message is, we're still working on it, the next thing is coming, you'll hear from us again in 10 minutes. I knew that was going to happen. So Tom, you started at the beginning talking about building trust. The district built trust with me as a parent, with all of the other parents knowing that they were going to do what they said they were going to do. And they did it calmly. Karen, congratulations to you for delivering the message in a calm manner. Thank you for monitoring all of the social media. So there were always questions like, I thought to myself, well, how are we going to get my son, my fourth grader, from the high school, either back to the elementary school? How are we going to get him home? How are we going to handle transportation? And little did I know that they were already formulating a plan. And sure enough, in the next 10-minute call, that information was disseminated to all of the parents. So it was like mentally, I could check off the transportation box. They had already preemptively told us how they were going to feed our students if they were there. So they were working always behind the scenes and communicating that message to us in a calm, collected, and honestly, trust building way. And I am forever grateful for the district and how they handled that.
Thank you, Lauren. You know, I think you've heard a theme here is preparation. And we're big believers that there's a concept called the flow. And it's funny, people that go against the flow. Have you ever been to the airport and you're waiting for a flight and the airline, it's canceled and people are screaming at the clerks. They're losing their minds. It is in the nature of airlines to be canceled. That happens. Why allow yourself to be freaked out? Now take this on board, professionals here. It is in the nature of your staffs in your community to make bad decisions. Stuff is going to happen. You are going to have crises. Like, oh my gosh, why me? Because you're a leader of a big organization in a crazy time. It's going to happen. So we have to decide what we're going to do with it. And I appreciate what Michael said at the beginning as well. It's moved from a once in a career crisis to death by 1,000 cuts. These tiny, these seemingly little things are, I also appreciate what both Lauren and Dr. Teff said, they're opportunities. Any calamity is an opportunity, I'm afraid. Obviously, we want to make sure everybody's safe, but when something happens, how are you demonstrating that you are trustworthy? And it's using methods like Dr. Teff said. And things, they're moving so fast right now. Phil, I know you have, I love the story about how things are moving so fast in your world about the individual you had at a, the trench coat situation. Because things move very fast. I think this story really hits that home.
Sure. One time when I was superintendent, I got a call over from the high school. They were going into lockdown, and a student had spotted a person in a trench coat with a ski mask carrying a briefcase walking right along the side of the building. They had a picture of it that they had taken out of a stairwell window of that individual. We looked. They immediately began looking and headed that direction when another student came up and said they saw the same thing. And so that was, students see something, say something. But we couldn't find the individual. And the building went into lockdown. Within 90 seconds of that lockdown, the first call came into central office and the high school phones lit up. I commend Michael for putting those processes in place to communicate so quickly and so regularly, even if you don't have the resources to be doing every 10-minute updates, and some school districts don't, to be able to go every 10 minutes. That initial call in a rapid fashion needs to happen. It is a natural hesitation or a natural reaction for us to hesitate. We're about to send a message out to 7,000 people or all of our parents. It is a natural reaction to hesitate. But in today's world, with phones and social media, we cannot wait. And in the meantime, we have thousands of people whose anxiety is building so rapidly because they haven't heard anything from the school district yet. And so in that particular case, we changed and completely revised our approach towards the way in which we were communicating. We did not have the system in place to get out within the first few minutes of a lockdown. And so we were in lockdown for 40 minutes and our parents didn't hear an official message. This was many years ago. Our parents didn't hear an official message from the school district until it was resolved. And so, boy, did we, rightfully so, did we hear about that. And we completely revised our approach towards how do we immediately, when we go into a lockdown, communicate with parents and families, to the point where we practice that every time we practice the lockdown. When we were practicing lockdowns, our communication was one component of that. It turns out the individual with the trench coat was a Rotarian who was there to judge a speech contest and walked out the wrong door on a cold winter day and said, "Oh my gosh, I parked all the way around the wrong side of the high school." And he pulled his ski mask out of his pocket and put it over his head and walked right along the school because that was the fastest way to get to the parking lot on the other side. But it was certainly a learning experience for us.
Of course it was a Rotarian, right? I mean, with the ski mask, what else would it be? That's goodness gracious. I think you're hearing a couple themes as well. Even if you don't have all of the information, you got to get something out. And I appreciate what Michael said earlier about, the idea that the first piece is, if indeed this is true, everybody's safe. The building is in lockdown. We'll get additional information when we can. The idea that we're aware of it, everybody's safe. I want you to understand, when there is a situation in which there's a potential safety issue, parents don't hear a thing until they know everybody's safe. We've seen sometimes where school districts, they'll get into some detailed messaging about things, and the parents is everybody okay? Once they know people are okay, then they can begin taking on information.
And that was the message that was deployed. Sorry to interrupt, but that was the message that was first deployed to the parents from the district. We knew what was happening. We knew that they were on top of it. We knew that the police were involved and everything was going to be handled. And to me, that was the best part, right? Like, the rest was minutia, but I know my kids are being transported. Here's our plan. They're going to a safe space. We've got all staff on call. And it was like, okay, district's got it.
We made it clear that we felt like it was a swatting call. I mean, we led with that. We wanted our parents to know that the kids are fine, but until we are 100% sure that it's a swatting issue, we're going to take care of their kids. And the other piece that I think that is impressive with any district that goes through this, when you're monitoring social media, you're creating systems on the fly. When a parent says, "What about lunch?" don't be surprised if the district is like, "What about lunch?" You are now problem solving that right now. It wasn't, "We're going to have lunch." What about getting the students from one building to another on election day? I mean, our typical spot is at election site. It was an election day. We don't get to go to that spot. We had to come up with another spot. All of those decisions somewhat are made on the fly. And I do think, though, Tom, from a training perspective, letting your families know right off the bat is really important, because that let the air out of the proverbial balloon right off the bat when they knew we were just being super careful and cautious. And the other havoc that happens, and you just have to go with the flow, is parents are going to show up, and you can't fight that. You got to build systems that embraces your families to come on property and to get children in a systematized way where we know children are going with the right person. But you can't tell parents to not be on property. You can't put up roadblocks. So we knew families were going to come, and we started creating systems right off the bat that embraced our families to come on property. And we knew they were going to take our students. And this wasn't just with the building that it happened. 50% of the district was gone within 2 hours. They went home.
Well, from a parent perspective, when I showed up at the high school to pick up my fourth grader, it was as if you had planned this for days. The tables were out front. We knew exactly who the staff members were. We knew who to go to say, "I'm Lauren Shear, I'm picking up my son." And someone went into the school and they got him and they brought him out, and it was seamless, as if you had planned it for weeks. As a parent, I walked into that situation knowing my kid is safe. The district's going to locate my child and bring him to me, and I'm going to take him home, and everything is calm. And I can tell you collectively, about all the parents that were there, I feel we had that collective experience, calm, collected. And again, It built capital. Dr. Teffs talked about building capital, and that's what it did for every parent that day, was build trust and build capital.
What we want to thank you for that. What we want to try to get across today, it's not if, it's when. It sounds cliche, but it's you're going to have an incident in which parents are coming to your schools to pick up your kids, or your board of development. It's going to happen. So what is your plan? You're going to have a circumstance where there's going to be a lockdown. What is your plan? We know these things are going to happen. I'm sorry to say that it's very probable. So what is your plan? We have a couple more minutes here. I do want to circle back on something else that was said a moment ago too, which I really appreciated, is Karen having the chops to tell the police chief, we need a message. One of the things you're going to see, there's a couple things here. One is there is a tendency to want to put your head down. And this is fascinating. Phil's seen this a lot. Lauren has seen this. I know Dr. Teffs has seen this, that when something happens, it's almost like there's an incoming artillery shell and you just put your head down. Like if this is going to blow over, it's going to be okay. Nobody's going to notice. We've had very intelligent leaders saying this is going to blow over. It's a human reaction. So understand, when something happens, your first reaction is to put your head down. You got to know that in today's technical hypercommunication world, 99.9% of the time, it's not going to blow over. So how are we getting the message out? Here's the next point. It's a lot of times police are your allies and your attorneys. You have to work with attorneys. Attorneys are absolutely an essential component of crisis communications. But here's the balance. An attorney, God bless their hearts, their message is going to be, don't say anything to anybody ever, because that's the most legally sound advice, and it is. What we have to get from them is, once again, we have to say, oh, I appreciate where you're coming from. I have to put out something for my community. There has to be a message. What can you give me? And we've worked with some fabulous attorneys, and they get it. So if you push back a little bit, they'll give you some nuggets to work with. But it's a relationship you have with their attorney. I wasn't sure if Phil or if Dr. Teffs, you wanted to talk about just the idea of that, that there's that sense of like, let's just not say anything, but we indeed have to do so.
Michael, you want to go? If not, I'll run.
Go for it, Phil.
You know, I remember learning years and years ago 3 points about communications that I had to remind myself of so many times. Tell the truth, tell it all, and tell it first. And you heard about that, the importance of transparency, telling the truth. Just tell people what's happening. But even in other types of crises, it might be a staff member that has misbehaved. It might be the results of an investigation that are coming out. There are lots of ways that there can be ultimately a violation of trust. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping that trust with our community from the perspective of the district, but telling the truth, tell it all as you can within legal ramifications. You can't violate FERPA rights or anything to tell it all. But you don't want to just give part of the story that might come out later and hope parts don't come out. Tell it all, and then tell it first. And Tom is so right. I mean, I absolutely naturally wanted to put my head down and say, do we really have, I'm not sure this is going to turn into a big thing. Do we have to tell everybody? And I never one time regretted having told everyone. There were times I regretted waiting. And so try to remember those pieces. Tell the truth, tell it all within legal bounds, tell it first.
Excellent. Thank you. Gosh, I wish we had, we're coming up on our time here. I wish we had another 2 hours to talk about this, because we have just scratched the surface of this stuff. What we're really trying to get across in this short amount of time is have a plan. It is going to happen. Something is going to happen, whether big or little. And when something happens, view it as, deal with the situation, but view it as an opportunity. View this as an opportunity for us to shine as a district. What protocols do you have in place? What people, what training? And as we wrap it up here, I must say that as sort of a shameless plug, this is what we do at Impact Group as far as crisis communication. If there's any partnership you need to help support you in a crisis, we would be thrilled to do so. We do a lot of crisis communication training. We also do work with strategic planning for districts, as well as we're the outsourced communications department for many districts, as well as boards of DD in cities and communities. We'd be honored to work with any of you. If you have any questions regarding crisis communications, know that you can always reach out to myself, Phil, or Lauren at the Impact Group. we'd be more than happy to speak to you. I want to thank Dr. Tefts for being with us here today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you all.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate everyone. Good luck, and we hope if a crisis occurs, you got your ducks in a row. Good luck, everybody. Have a great day.